In the summer of 2003, I decided to backpack through South America. Brazil was the crown jewel of my trip. Its endless beaches, colorful culture, and incredible food were everything I dreamed of. After a few days in Rio de Janeiro, I craved something quieter, more remote. Locals at my hostel suggested a secluded beach about an hour's drive from the nearest town. They promised it was worth the trek, a hidden paradise with crystal clear waters and untouched sand. The journey wasn't easy. I hitched a ride with a fisherman who dropped me off on a dirt road and pointed toward a trail through the trees. "It's like 15 minutes walking, yeah?" he said in broken English. "Not many go there. You'll like it." He wasn't lying. When I stepped out of the dense forest, I was greeted by a view that took my breath away. The beach stretched for miles, the sand so white it looked like sugar under the blazing sun. The ocean was a gradient of blues, and apart from a few birds circling overhead, it was completely deserted. It was perfect. I set up my towel near a large rock outcropping, unpacked a book, and let the sound of the waves wash away the exhaustion of travel. The isolation was exactly what I needed, or so I thought. An hour passed before I noticed the van. It appeared at the far end of the beach, barely visible from where I was sitting. At first, I thought it might be some locals coming to fish or picnic, but something about it felt out of place. The van wasn't parked in the open. It was half hidden by a bunch of palm trees, its dull white paint peeling in the harsh sun. I tried convincing myself it was nothing, but as I watched, the uncomfortable feeling in my gut grew stronger. The first individual exited the van, a man in a black shirt and jeans. He looked around the beach, his movements very deliberate, scanning the area like he was looking for something. Or someone. He waved to the others, and more people climbed out, their clothes dark against the bright sand. But it wasn't until they opened the back of the van that I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. From where I was sitting, I could barely make out the shapes of people being pulled from the vehicle. They tripped as they were led onto the sand, their arms bound and their faces covered with blindfolds. My stomach dropped as I realized these weren't passengers. These were captives. I froze, unsure of what to do. The group of men, there were 5 or 6 of them, moved with precision, herding the blindfolded individuals toward the shoreline. There was no yelling or chaos. Everything was quiet and methodical, like they'd done this before. Then I saw the speedboat. It was anchored just offshore, bobbing gently in the waves. One of the men waded into the water, signaling to someone on the boat. A second later, an engine roared to life, and the boat edged closer to the shore. The captives were pushed toward the water, their feet dragging through the sand. Some fought, but it didn't matter. The men were stronger, and they had guns. I could see the faint glint of metal as one of them raised his weapon, motioning for the others to hurry. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I was the only witness to what was happening. I ducked lower behind the rocks, barely daring to breathe. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But where could I go? The trail through the forest was too exposed, and I didn't know if they'd already seen me. I was trapped, forced to watch as the group loaded the captives onto the boat. One of the blindfolded figures, a woman, judging by her body, tripped and fell into the water. She tried to stand, but one of the men grabbed her by the arm, yanking her roughly to her feet. Even from a distance, I could see her trembling. I clenched my fists, every fiber of my being wanting to intervene. But what could I do? I was alone, unarmed and terrified. If they spotted me, I knew I wouldn't stand a chance. The loading process didn't take long. Within minutes, the captives were packed onto the speedboat, sitting in a huddled group on the deck. One of the men stayed behind to secure the van, while the others climbed aboard. The engine roared again, louder this time, and the boat began to drift away from the shore. I waited until the boat became barely visible on the far horizon before daring to move. My legs were shaky as I stood up, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The van was still parked by the trees, but I didn't see the man who'd stayed behind. My gut told me to get out of there before he came back. I grabbed my bag and bolted toward the forest, every snap of a twig underfoot making my heart race. The trail felt longer than before, the trees closing in around me as I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the dirt road where the fisherman had dropped me off. but the road was empty. My chest tightened as I realized I'd have to wait for someone to pass by. I bent low by the side of the road, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Minutes felt like hours, my mind replaying the scene on the beach over and over. Who were those people? Where were they being taken? Finally, a beat-up truck appeared in the distance, its engine rattling as it approached. I flagged it down, waving my arms frantically. The driver, an older man with weathered skin and kind eyes, rolled down the window and asked in Portuguese if I needed help. My Portuguese was basic at best, but I managed to explain enough for him to understand. He nodded gravely and motioned for me to get in. As we drove toward the nearest town, I told him everything. His expression darkened, and he shook his head, muttering something about traffickers and the coast. When we reached the town, he took me straight to the local police station. I recounted the events in broken Portuguese and English, hoping they understood enough to take me seriously. The officers listened intently, their faces grim as they wrote down the notes. One of them picked up the phone, speaking rapidly into the receiver. I stayed at the station for hours, answering questions and trying to provide as much detail as I could. Eventually, they thanked me and assured me they would investigate, but as I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't be enough. A few weeks later, back in the US, I received an email from one of the officers. He tracked me down through the hostel where I'd been staying. The email was brief, written in rough English, but the message was clear. They'd found the van abandoned miles from the beach. Inside were zip ties, blindfolds, and traces of blood. The speedboat and its passengers were never found. To this day, the memory of that beach haunts me. The sound of the waves, the smell of salt in the air, it all feels tainted now. I wonder about the people on that boat, the woman who stumbled, and the others who were too scared to fight back. Were they ever rescued? Or did they disappear, like so many others, into the shadowy depths of human trafficking? I'll never know. But one thing is certain, that secluded beach, once a picture of paradise, now exists only in my nightmares. It was a summer weekend, so my friends and I decided to spend it camping at a secluded beach, a few hours away from the city. We'd heard about the spot from a coworker who said it was quiet, scenic, and free from the usual tourist crowds. It sounded perfect, a chance to unwind and soak in the ocean breeze before heading back to our busy routines. We arrived mid-morning, the sun already high in the sky. The beach was everything we'd hoped for. Pristine sand, crystal clear waves, and not another soul in sight. After unloading our gear, we picked a spot near the dunes to set up camp. As we scouted for the best location, we noticed something very unusual about 100 yards down the shore. A tent. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal to us. Maybe someone had left it there while out for a swim or a hike. But as we got closer, we realized the tent wasn't just abandoned. It looked like it had been there for days. The fabric was weathered, the stakes barely holding it in place against the wind. We couldn't resist our curiosity, so we approached it cautiously. The flap was partially open, and inside we saw a backpack, a pair of shoes, and a few other personal items. It didn't look like the kind of stuff someone would just leave behind. "What do you think?" my friend Eliana asked. "Should we look inside?" I stopped for a moment, but curiosity won out. "Just a quick look," I said. Inside the tent, it was clear someone had been staying there recently. There were clothes folded neatly on one side, a half-empty water bottle, and a phone sitting on top of a sleeping bag. Beside it was a wallet. Eliana picked it up and opened it, revealing a driver's license. The name read, "For the sake of this story, I changed the name, Evan Mitchell." The photo showed a young guy, maybe mid-20s. "Do you think he's nearby?" Eliana asked, her voice quieter now. "Maybe," I said, though something about the scene made me uncomfortable. Why would someone leave behind their phone and wallet? It just didn't feel okay. As we stepped back from the tent, I noticed something in the sand nearby. A dark stain, partially covered by the shifting wind. My stomach dropped as I bent down to get a closer look. It was blood. The stain wasn't large, but it was enough to make us all uneasy. Eliana and I exchanged a look, and without saying a word, we started scanning the area. About 20 feet from the tent, we found more. a smear along the sand, like something or someone had been dragged toward the dunes. What the hell happened here? My friend Owen said under his breath. None of us had an answer, but the creepy stillness of the beach suddenly felt suffocating. We debated what to do. Part of me wanted to pack up and leave right then and there, but another part felt compelled to figure out what had happened. "Let's call someone," Eliana said, pulling out her phone. But of course, there was no service this far out. We decided to follow the trail, even though every step made my chest tighten. The smears led up the dunes and into a patch of tall grass. As we pushed through, the air seemed heavier, the sounds of the waves fading behind us. At the top of the dune, we found it. A single shoe lying at an odd angle, partially buried in the sand. Next to it, the grass was flattened, like a fight had taken place. There was no more blood, no sign of a body, just that one lone shoe. We hurried back to our campsite, our cheerful mood completely replaced by a tense, uneasy silence. None of us wanted to say it out loud, but we all knew something terrible had happened here. We packed up our belongings as quickly as we could, stealing a look at the abandoned tent as we loaded our gear into the car. The drive back to town felt like it took forever. The quiet tension in the car is unrelenting. When we reached the nearest gas station, we told the elderly attendant what we'd found and asked if there was a police station nearby. He gave us directions, and we went straight there. The cops on duty listened as we described the tent, the wallet, and the bloodstains. He took down our statement and promised to send someone to investigate. A week later, Eliana texted me a local news article. The headline read, "Missing hiker's tent found on remote beach." The article confirmed what we'd feared. The tent belonged to the alias Evan Mitchell, who had been reported missing by his family 2 weeks earlier. The authorities had found the site we described, but there was no trace of Evan, just the belongings we'd seen and the same bloodstains. To this day, I can't stop thinking about that shoe on the dune. It felt like the answer was right there, just out of reach. Every time I hear waves or see an empty stretch of beach, I wonder what really happened to Evan. And I wonder if he's still out there, waiting to be found, or if whatever happened to him is still waiting for someone else. It was the summer of 2014, and my friends and I were celebrating the end of our senior year with a weekend at the beach. The weather was perfect. Sunny skies, warm water, and a slight breeze that kept things from getting too hot. We rented a small motorboat from a local marina, eager to spend the day out on the water, free from rules and responsibilities. There were 7 of us, 4 guys, 3 girls, packed onto the boat with coolers, speakers, and way too much confidence. We felt invincible, like nothing could go wrong. Looking back, that was our first mistake. We spent the afternoon cruising near the shore, blasting music, taking selfies, making out, and jumping into the water whenever we got too hot. Typical crazy kinds of stuff young people do. The driver, my friend Nate, was the one who had convinced us to rent the boat. He loved being in control, and we all trusted him, even though he didn't have much experience behind the wheel. By evening, the excitement started to settle into a lazy rhythm. We anchored the boat about 200 yards from the shore, floating peacefully while we ate sandwiches and cracked jokes. The beach was crowded, but out on the water, it felt like we had our own little slice of paradise. That's when Nate got an idea. "Let's take it out further," he said, his grin wide and infectious. "We've been stuck near the beach all day. Let's go see some real water." The rest of us hesitated. The rental agreement had come with clear instructions: stay within a certain distance of the shore. But Nate was persuasive, and the combination of sunshine and adrenaline had dulled our judgment. "Come on," he nagged. "What's the worst that could happen?" Reluctantly, we all agreed. As Nate steered the boat farther from the beach, the waves grew larger. At first, it was fun. Every dip and rise felt like a mini roller coaster. But soon the swells became choppier, and the boat started to rock more violently. "Maybe we should head back," one of the girls, Rachel, said nervously, clinging tightly to the side of the boat. "Relax," Nate replied, his tone casual. "I've got this." The rest of us exchanged uneasy look but said nothing. None of us wanted to be the one to ruin the fun. Then, out of nowhere, it happened. A rogue wave. It was massive, towering above us like a wall of water. There was no time to react. The wave hit the side of the boat with a force I can only describe as bone-shaking. The boat jerked violently, tilting to one side before flipping completely. Suddenly, we were in the water, gasping for air as the cold hit us like a slap to the face. For a moment, everything was chaos. The sound of the waves crashing, the screams of the girls, the rush of water in my ears. It was disorienting. I surfaced, coughing and sputtering, and immediately looked around. The boat was upside down, half submerged, and the cooler and other supplies were floating away. "Is everyone okay?" I shouted, my voice cracking with panic. One by one, my friends surfaced, their faces pale and their breaths ragged. It was a miracle, but everyone had made it out of the boat. We clung to the capsized hull, trying to stay afloat as the waves continued to toss us around. The shore didn't seem far, but the current was strong, and exhaustion was setting in fast. Rachel was crying, her mascara running down her face as she held my arm. "We have to swim back," Nate said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "We can't stay here." I wasn't sure if he was right. The waves were relentless, and every time I tried to gauge the distance to shore, it felt like it was getting farther away. And then we saw them, the lifeguards. 2 red rescue boards cut through the waves with precision, their riders paddling with practiced strength. Relief flooded through me as they reached us, their calm voices cutting through the chaos. "Everyone okay?" one of them asked, scanning our group. "Yeah," I said, though my voice was shaky. "We're all here." "Good. Hold on to the boards, and we'll get you back to shore." The swim back felt like it took hours, though it couldn't have been more than 15 minutes. The lifeguards were strong, guiding us through the rough water with steady confidence. By the time we reached the shore, a small crowd had gathered, watching as we stumbled onto the sand. Paramedics checked us over, but apart from some scrapes and bruises, we were all fine. Nate sat quietly, his usual bravado gone, staring at the overturned boat being towed back by the marina staff. Later, when we were sitting on the sand, wrapped in towels and sipping water, the weight of what had happened began to sink in. "We were so stupid," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "That could have been so much worse." None of us argued. The reality of how close we'd come to disaster was undeniable. The lifeguards had saved us, but it was clear we'd pushed our luck too far. That day left a mark on all of us. For weeks afterward, I had nightmares about the waves, the cold water, and the panicked moments when I wasn't sure if everyone had made it out. We learned our lesson the hard way, and while I still go to the beach, I've never been able to look at the ocean the same way. It's beautiful, sure, but it's also unpredictable, powerful, and utterly indifferent to us. And that's a lesson I'll one day tell my grandkids.